Hi, I'm Dan Q, and you're listening to a podcast that nobody asked for, exclusively about things that only I find interesting. Today I'll be talking about Here and Now, the Pop Shuvit album. No, wait. Today I'll be talking about Necker Island. I swear those two things are related. As usual, there's a blog post to accompany this episode. You'll find the link wherever you listen to your podcasts, or you can look me up on danq.me. Necker Island. So, Wikipedia is turning 25, and to celebrate its birthday, they've been encouraging/challenging people to read one Wikipedia article a day for 25 consecutive days, which I thought I can do that, and I can do one better. I've been picking random articles, reading around them, and when they're interesting, turning them into blog posts and podcast episodes. Today's random article was Here and Now, the Pop Shuvit album, but today's topic is Necker Island, Hawaii. Necker Island. I observed about 15 years ago in a blog post that it's very easy to get lost down a series of Wikipedia links and have to use the back button to remember how you got there, and that is very much what happened to me today. My random article for the day was about Here and Now, the second album of Pop Shuvit, a Malaysian hip-hop/new metal band most active from around 2002 to 2011. I listened to the album. The title track's pretty good, and I enjoyed Old School Rocker and Put 'em Up too. Here, as you're listening on the podcast, here's a snippet of what Pop Shuvit sound like. So, that's Pop Shuvit. The band take their name from a skateboarding trick called a Pop Shuvit. Presumably they use a different spelling as an effort to aid their ability to protect their copyright on it. They spell their band name P-O-P-S-H-U-V-I-T, whereas the skateboard trick is sometimes, not always, spelled P-O-P-S-H-O-V-E-I-T. And it's when I was reading about this that I briefly got lost in the depths of Wikipedia's article about skateboarding. So, first I wanted to know what a Pop Shuvit was, and it turns out to be a combination of an ollie and a shuvit, which still sounded like a foreign language to me, so I had to read about both of those. And I learned that an ollie is when you stomp down on the back of your board to make it jump, while you slide your front foot forward from the midpoint to keep it somewhat level and stop it from flipping over, which results in the entire board jumping while remaining almost horizontal while the skater flies just above it. And a shuvit is when you rotate the board 180 degrees laterally, so the back end of the board becomes the front and vice versa. So the board ends up landing and its wheels are rolling in the opposite direction to what they were doing at the start of the trick, but the board and the skater carry on moving forwards. It's done by giving the board a bit of a kick to start it rotating and then landing on it with enough pressure to stop it rotating again. That is a terrible explanation. Wikipedia gave me a terrible diagram that doesn't help either. If you really want to understand it, you need to go find a video, I guess, but there isn't really one available on Wikipedia, so I didn't share one. The Pop Shuvit was originally called the Thai Hop, after its inventor, Ty Page, a famous skateboarder in the 1970s who was also known by the name Mr. Incredible. I could list the other 50-plus moves that he's credited with inventing, like the Payday, Daffy, and Yeah Right Manual, or the Toe Spin 360, but it'd only really be fun and interesting if I mixed in a few fake ones I came up with myself, like the Nip Trip, Double Pipe Tail, or the Indo 180. Skateboarding's been around since at least the 1950s, and it sort of exploded in popularity in the 1960s, but a major reason that Ty was able to invent totally new tricks in the 1970s was the result of two new innovations that took off at the time. The first is polyurethane wheels, which were invented, or at least invented for skateboards, by a man called Frank Nasworthy. Previously, the skateboards either had hard steel wheels, of the kind that were used by roller skates at the time, or clay composite wheels. Steel wheels were fast and smooth running, but because they're hard, they provide very little grip, which makes it harder to do stunts, especially when you have to control the landing. Clay composite wheels are softer and easier, but they wore out quickly, needing to be replaced after sometimes as little as 7 hours of skating. Polyurethane gives the best of both worlds, a long-wearing but soft enough to grip surface to the wheel from a material that was at this point rapidly becoming cheaper to manufacture. The second invention that helped Thai achieve fame in the 1970s was the kicktail, invented and patented by a man called Larry Stevenson. It's the curved up bit you see at the end of a skateboard nowadays. It was so named because it originally only appeared at the back of the board. Larry cleverly obtained a separate later patent on double kicktails, one at the front and one at the rear. The front one's sometimes apparently called a kick nose. A kicktail makes it much easier and safer to lift the board by stamping down on it, or else it can make it possible to get more lift with a similar level of ease compared to a completely flat board. There's so much terminology in skateboards. I learned that the wheel is attached to something called a truck, which is attached to the deck of the board. I'm sure that if you looked at skateboarding or done it any amount, then I just sound like a complete idiot right now, but I promise this is all new to me. Ty Page helped promote the kicktail as part of Mākaha team, sponsored by Stevenson's company, Mākaha Skateboards. And this is where I jumped into a whole different rabbit hole. You see, at this point in history, as skateboarding was just beginning to come into its own as a sport, there was this enormous intersection between surfboarders and skateboarders, many of whom would surf when the weather and tide conditions were right, and skate when they weren't. Larry Stevenson was such an individual. On his way to the deployment in the Korean War, he stopped at Hawaii, where he found a particular beach to be excellent for surfing. That beach, which would eventually give its name to his company, was at the town of Mākaha. There's a picture of Mākaha Beach on the Wikipedia article about it, and man, it does look pretty lush. One thing I found interesting while reading about Mākaha is that it's the home of a place called Kāne'āki Heiau. This is Hawaii's most completely restored heiau. Heiau are temples of the indigenous religion of native Hawaiians, a polytheistic and animistic belief structure, seemingly related to earlier Maori practices brought over by Polynesian seafarers from about 800 CE onwards. According to tradition, heiau were built by Menehune, mythological 2-foot-high dwarves who lived in the deep forests and hidden valleys, far from human, and came out at night to build structures and dig fish ponds. The concept is kind of comparable to the European idea of brownies or hobgoblins, in particular the pre-Christian idea of these spirits as being something that's helpful to humans as long as they're treated with respect. Of course, pressure from Christian missionaries in Hawaii from 1820 onwards led to the neglect and destruction of most heiau, except for the most remote of them. One such remote temple was the standing stones on Necker Island. See, we got there eventually. Necker Island is named after Jacques Necker, France's finance minister at the time that the first European explorer, Jean-François de Galloup, sighted the rock. We don't know what the ancient Hawaiian peoples called it, but reverse engineering Hawaiian chants passed down by oral tradition that include descriptions of islands has led the Hawaiian Lexicon Committee to assign it the name Mokumanamana, which means pinnacled island. We also don't know when Necker Island was last inhabited, but it seems that its poor thin soil is likely to have prevented permanent settlement. However, there is evidence that its caves were used for human habitation from time to time, and some were used as tombs. Even landing on the island is difficult. It's got these sheer stone cliffs around its edge, which is part of the rim of what was once Necker Island's volcanic cone of a subsurface volcano. Some researchers point out that the structures on Necker Island represent an earlier iteration of Hawaiian religion than the other Heiau, and they use a Maori term, mare, to refer to them, because similar structures are found out in Polynesia and even in New Zealand. But anyway, do you know what archaeologists found on Necker Island amongst the standing stones? Menehune figures, the dwarves we talked about before, carved out of basalt, each 1.5 to 2 feet tall. Tales in the oral traditions of the natives of the island of Kauai describe Necker Island as the last refuge of these mythological diminutive builders after they were allegedly chased off the main island by the newly arrived Polynesians. If you're wondering where those stone figures are right now, then, well, they're in museums. 2 of them are in the British Museum, because of course they are. In the way that was long traditional for European empires exploring the culturally important sites of distant lands, many of the artefacts found on Necker Island aren't there anymore, but the standing stones are still standing there, and in a sort of reparation, human remains that were removed and put into a museum have been returned and reburied, at least. So that's Necker Island, which I learned about because Wikipedia randomly chose me an article about an album by a Malaysian hip-hop band whose name derives from a skateboarding trick that's possible thanks to an invention by a man whose skateboarding company was named after a surf-friendly Hawaiian beach near a town that has ruins of a temple allegedly built by mythological dwarves who are said to have lived on this island. It's been quite the journey, and I wonder where tomorrow's will take me. Once again, this episode was based on a blog post, which you can find on danq.me. If you've enjoyed hearing my long and rambling journey from Malaysian hip-hop to Hawaiian islands, then leave a comment there or drop me an email on podcast@danq.me. And as always, Dan Q for listening. Dan Q very much.